Hello, my name is Carolina Mercado, and this is my video response to Module 3's Listening Practice Assignment for Introduction to Communications taught by Professor Philip Dixon at Aspen University. For the assignment, I watched Beyond Vietnam, A Time to Break Silence by the esteemed civil rights activist Martin Luther King Jr. He gave his speech at Riverside Church in New York City on April 4th, 1967. I chose this speech because I have not heard that many of his speeches other than I Have a Dream, and I admire his philosophies. The main point of this speech was to speak for those who do not have a voice, even if the situation does not affect you. And some of us who have already begun to break the silence of night have found that the calling to speak is often a vocation of agony, but we must speak. King Jr., 1967. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke about the atrocities that occurred during the Vietnam War and criticized America's hypocrisy as the U.S. attempted to liberate Vietnam from communism while aiding France to reconquer her former colony. King Jr., 1967. He also tied in the injustices the Vietnamese faced during the war with the injustices the poor suffered in America. The link to this speech did not include a video, so I was not able to identify any nonverbal cues. However, Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his speech elegantly as he paused to allow for silence, used a consistent pace and prosody, and spoke with a lower voice. By the audio, it seemed like the audience was attentive and retaining what was being said. I noticed that Martin Luther King Jr. criticized the United States a lot in this speech, which would have not been taken too kindly by some people. Since Martin Luther King Jr. was a pastor or reverend, I imagined that his experience giving speeches would show in his posture and his eye contact. Being an African American civil rights activist and speaking out against the Vietnam War during this time period would have demanded perfection so that people actually listened to what he had to say. This speech is one of the most influential speeches ever given, although I have to admit that the speech was long and it was challenging to stay focused. I attempted to take notes for this assignment while I listened, but I often found myself trying to perfect what I was writing rather than listen. Also, the age of the audio clip is quite old, so it does not have the best quality. I kept getting distracted by all the coughs I heard in the audience and thinking about our modern pandemic, and Martin Luther King Jr.'s pronunciation of some words left me questioning what he said. Thankfully, American Rhetoric has a transcript for the audio clip, so I was able to follow along for the most part, which prevented me from taking notes. Whenever I tried taking notes or trying to fix the formatting, I would lose track of where I was in the transcript. Then it was difficult for me to find where Martin Luther King Jr. was in the speech because the website did not include timestamps alongside the transcript, so I ended up scrolling back and forth looking for keywords until I caught up. Finally, I am a time-oriented listener, so I try to focus on the main points of what was said so I can move on to the next task. So listening to an hour-long speech alone was a challenge. The beauty of being able to listen to a speech online is that you can still do other things. Within reason, of course. I noticed that I kept checking my phone for the time and if I received any notifications. Whenever I did this, I would automatically open my phone for a visual distraction, like viewing Snapchat stories or Instagram posts. If I was looking at a picture, I was still able to pay attention to the speech, but if I watched another video or read something, I was not able to pay attention to do both at once. I think this was because of overstimulation and my senses were trying to pay attention to the strongest stimulant. In my room, I have my dogs, right next to me, so I would occasionally look at them or give them some love while still being able to listen to the speech. This listening practice was very insightful, and I learned a little bit more about myself. Now I know what to avoid and what I can effectively multitask. Whenever I am listening to a long speech, I notice I notice the way the speaker's delivery and focus on the important aspects of the message. Also, I should avoid additional audio stimulation and limit visual stimulation. Thank you for watching this video, and please let me know if you have any comments or concerns.